Hey, cool. Hey everybody, my name is Carter Rabasa, and I'm a developer evangelist for a little outfit called Twilio. David, thank you so much for having me. I apologize for stepping on your introduction. I just had a whole joke kind of set up for that, but I'm going to tell the joke anyway. And people who are watching this presentation in the future, we're going to get they're going to laugh their asses off, even though you people are going to, it won't be quite as funny. But I really am excited to be here, and I just want to spend some time with you all to talk a little bit about Twilio and WebRTC and how these technologies used together can turn a web browser into a phone, which is pretty cool. So a little bit about me. Once again, I'm a developer evangelist. I've been at Twilio for about 2.5 years. This is actually a picture of me shortly after I joined Twilio 2.5 years ago. I've grown up a lot since then. Okay, so this is actually my daughter, Catherine. And this photo was actually taken at JSConf 2012. I know David was at JSConf in Scottsdale. Yeah, so I was at Twilio sent 2 1/4 developer evangelists to JSConf 2012. And I can tell you without a doubt that Catherine completely kicked my ass. She's got a bright future as a developer evangelist, should she want it. But I am married. I have 2 beautiful children, and I am not from LA. So here's the thing. So not only am I not from LA, I am from a city that I consider to be the polar opposite of LA. And as all of you know at this point, that city would be Seattle. And and I'm not joking. It was pouring rain as I flew out of Seattle this morning. And I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty happy to be in Los Angeles right now. So thanks again for having me. So can I get a show of hands? Who here is familiar and has used Twilio? Okay, cool. Like maybe 25% of the people here. So Twilio's mission statement is to change communications forever. And that's a cool mission statement. Good marketing. But really specifically, Twilio's mission is to change this industry by moving it from its legacy in hardware and machines to its future in software. And for all of you as developers, what that really means is that Twilio allows you to programmatically send and receive text messages and make and receive voice and voice over IP phone calls, all just from writing some code. And that's pretty awesome. Another thing that I just want to share is that Twilio, from its very beginnings, was architected entirely on top of web standards. There are actually a lot of ways that you could imagine building a platform to let developer A send a text message to person B. But a long time ago, they decided to make a big bet on web standards, and specifically 3 web standards: RESTful APIs, Webhooks, and as you'll see later, WebRTC for VOIP in the browser. And this is super important because Twilio believes in developers. Twilio specifically believes in web developers. And if you imagine for a second that this sort of sad-looking reindeer-ish creature is the telecommunications industry. So Twilio made this huge bet. They said, hey, what would happen to this industry if we unleashed developers on it, right? Like what would happen if we could open this black box of telecommunications and make it available to every single person sitting in this room? And it's a bet that the company made, and they were hoping that if they did that, something like this would happen. So for those of you who are vision impaired, what is being shown on the screen is it's actually the best animated GIF ever created. Like canonical, right? I think it's trademarked. Like this is the best animated GIF ever invented. You don't even try to create a better animated GIF. No, this captures exactly how we at Twilio feel about what developers can do if you put the power of telecommunications in their hands. So I don't want you to think that I was going to run through slides for the entire presentation. What I really want to do is write some code right now with all of you to show you exactly how this works.
That being said, will your slides be available to us?
Yes. In fact, I have a URL at the end of the presentation that isn't live yet, but it will be, I promise. So here's some code. This is a 13-line Node.js application. And all it is doing right now is serving my presentation. So this is a Reveal.js presentation. And these 13 lines are essentially serving static files from the file system. So there's nothing complicated that's happening here. But I'm going to make this Node app a lot smarter. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and require the Twilio Node module. Now, Twilio ships a Node module, which is awesome because I'm sure many people here are Node developers. But we also ship helper libraries for every major language you can think of, including Ruby, Python, PHP, .NET, Java, so on and so forth. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a little variable. I'm just going to use this to parse the request, the URL of the request that's coming in. And this is going to let me do something like this. This is going to let me do something where I can say, hey, if the path of the request coming in is SMS, let's not serve static files. Let's do something different. Let's see. OK, cool. All right. So what I want to do is I just want to create the simplest possible Twilio application. First question, who here does not have a cell phone on their person? OK. It's a trick question. Everybody has a cell phone on their person. It's 2014, right? I would like all of you to please take your cell phones out, because this is an interactive presentation, and I'm going to need your help. So the Hello World example for Twilio involves you guys sending a text message to me and me sending a reply. This is the simplest possible Twilio application you can imagine creating. So I'm going to go ahead and just log into my Twilio account. And I'm going to use Twilio. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use Twilio to actually purchase a phone number, which is pretty rad. You can imagine, you can think of buying a phone number with Twilio exactly like buying a domain with GoDaddy, except the experience doesn't suck. So, and I apologize for the internet. Oh my goodness. I'm running this off for very valid reasons. I'm running this off my MiFi puck, which is not cooperating right now. OK, well, all right. Seems like it's working a little bit better. So let's go over to numbers. OK, great. So let's buy a phone number. Can someone give me, what's the area code around here? 310. OK, lots of area codes. So let's see if we have any 310 phone numbers available. We have lots of 310 area phone numbers available. Fantastic. So I'm just going to buy the first one. And boom. So like that's exactly what it took to buy a phone number. I'm not sure it could have been simpler. But now I need to set up the number. So this is where I'm going to go back and just explain this graph a little bit better. So you can think of the architecture behind Twilio as dealing with inbound and outbound communications. So right here, if someone on a phone sends a text message or makes a phone call to a Twilio number, that's an incoming SMS or phone call. And the way that Twilio is architected to handle that is that when you purchase your number, you actually configure your phone number with URLs to your web application. So when those events happen, Twilio actually makes an HTTP request to your web application. And that's pretty awesome because presumably you're all web developers, like you know how to build web applications. So really we don't have to teach you anything else. Like if you know how to build a web application, you effectively know how to build a Twilio application. So that's what I'm going to do. I need to. What I want to do is I want to configure. So there are two webhooks. One is called the voice request URL. That's the URL that we send a request to when someone makes a phone call. And there's one called the messaging request URL, and that's the URL that we send a request to when someone sends a text message. So this is the one that we're going to go ahead and configure. But before I can do that, I actually have to write the app. So that's exactly what this /SMS path is going to do for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and create something called a TWIML response. TWIML is just an acronym that stands for Twilio Markup Language. And what happens is when you are writing a typical web application, your web server is going to send back markup CSS and JavaScript to a web browser, right? When Twilio makes a request to your web application, you actually need to send back some specially formatted XML, and that's what we call TWIML. In this case, I don't have to worry about actually hand coding XML. I'm going to use JavaScript to tell Twilio exactly what I want to do, and under the covers, XML will get generated, so I don't have to worry about that. So great, so I've got a TWIML variable, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the simplest thing possible, which is just to specify that I want to send a message back to all of you saying, hey, thanks for saying hi, ping me anytime at Carter Rabasa for questions about Twilio or awesome coffee, because I'm from Seattle and I know everything about coffee. And that's it. I mean, that's all it takes to build the simplest possible Twilio application. Now all I need to do is just send this back to Twilio. So I'm going to go ahead and use Node to just send it back 200 status code and specify that the content type is going to be text XML. And then go ahead and just send it back. So this is the simplest possible Twilio application. Now, one thing that's kind of cool about this style of architecting and building software is that I can test it really, really easily, right? Even before I fill in this URL right here, I can go and just go up to my browser and make this request. And if it doesn't work, see, if I get that oops, then I'm like, oh, like I made a mistake. And the mistake that I made is, geez, I don't know, something. A typo. But there you go. But the point is, exactly the same way that you would develop and test a web application is exactly how you would develop or test a Twilio application. So let's try this again. Awesome. This is exactly what I wanted it to look like. So at this point, I feel really secure about configuring my webhooks. Now, there's one thing I have to do. You notice that it says localhost. This is all running on my laptop. And that's a problem for Twilio. Twilio needs these URLs to be accessible on the public internet. So I'm going to use a little tool called ngrok. It's awesome. It's just like a little piece of tunneling software that puts what's on my local host on the public internet. It's free, and you can download it for PC, Mac, and Linux. And there are many, many other tools that do the exact same thing. So it doesn't really matter what you use, but in this case, I'm going to use this. So great. So I just go down here, I paste this in, and I hit save. So now we have somewhat of a moment of truth. If this works, then I'm something, less than a moron. If it doesn't work, then I feel terrible about myself. So here's where I need your help. If everybody could take out their phone and send a text message to that number that you see on the screen, I'll go ahead and read it out. It's 310-896-4972. And you can say whatever you want, although I do hope that you keep it classy. So I'm going to go ahead and test it myself. And you should get a response. Has anyone gotten a response yet? Awesome, cool. So we have a working Twilio application. So look, I'm gonna go ahead and power ahead because I know you guys want to hear about phone calls and you certainly want to hear about WebRTC and VoIP in the browser. But I just wanted to kind of level set us a little bit. So now we know we can send and receive text messages, which is totally cool. The next logical step would be to make a phone call because eventually we want to get to a point where we're making phone calls directly in the browser. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a new endpoint, only this one we'll call voice. And everything stays kind of the same, except we're going to generate slightly different TWIML. So what we're going to do is, what I want to do is, now for all of you who texted in, I have your phone numbers. So I think it'd be super cool if I called you all back and dropped you into a giant conference call. I think that would be super, super interesting, and maybe dangerous. I don't know. We'll see. So let's go ahead and do that. And I mean, honestly, it couldn't be much simpler. I'm just going to go ahead and use our helper library to specify. All I need to do now is just specify a unique name for the conference. I'm going to be super original and call it conference. and we're virtually done. How many people are here? Like 40-ish, something like that? Okay, cool. Conference rooms are actually limited to a maximum of 40 people, and I'd hate to leave anybody out. So I'm going to go ahead and do this little thing. I'm going to dump you all into sort of random conference rooms. And that's really, really easy to do. I'm just going to go ahead and create a random number between 0 and 8, we'll say. And that'll be the room that you get dumped into. And I'll just go ahead and append that little variable here. So awesome. So like I think this works. Of course, the only way to know for sure is to test it in your browser, because that's how web developers test things. And indeed, it does work. And I can reload this, and it works exactly as I would expect. So now I still need to call all of you. And in order to do that, I need to do two things. I need to query Twilio to get all of your phone numbers, and then I need to use Twilio to actually make the phone calls. And for that, we're going to use our REST API. And in order to do that, I need to create something called a Twilio REST client, which is as easy as what you see right here. Now, one thing that I need to do, I need to authenticate. I need to tell Twilio effectively what my username and password is. We call these your account SID and your auth token, but just think of them as a username and a password for your program. So now I'm authenticated, and if I didn't provide the right values there, Twilio would not allow me to run any queries or make any phone calls or do anything. So you have to authenticate. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and list all of the messages. And I'm going to go ahead and scope this. You guys probably saw in my account that I actually own lots of phone numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and scope this to just the phone number that I just purchased, which is this phone number right here. So I'm going to say, hey, Twilio, give me all of the messages that were sent to that phone number. And I'm going to get the result back. And so now I have all the messages, and I can loop through them. So for each function message, sweet. So awesome. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print out all of the messages that you guys sent me, because I'm sure they were all super polite and nice, and no one would have a problem if I printed them on the screen, right? I mean, obviously. So, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to call all of you and dump you into a conference call, and that's as easy as this. I need to pass 4 parameters to this function, and they're really self-explanatory. The first one is the to parameter, which is just your phone number. The next one is what you should see on your caller ID when your phone rings, which is just going to be the number that we purchased. And then the last thing is, once Twilio has actually made a connection from itself to your phone, it needs instructions on what to do once that connection is live. And that's what we wrote up there in that voice path. So we just need to give Twilio a fully qualified URL to that function that we wrote, which is easy. It's right here, /voice. Cool. Okay, so I feel reasonably confident that this is going to work. Why don't we check out our NodeMon?
You said there were 4.
Oh, I meant 3. But we do have an error, which is bound to happen. What are you going to do? Yes. We need to tell it. So let's say we'll call this voice, or we'll call this call. How's that sound? Awesome. So everything restarted well. So now I'm going to go ahead and one last thing. Sorry. I'm going to just go ahead and send a little response back to my browser of OK. So there isn't an open connection that's just left hanging open. So I feel pretty good. Hey. Nice. So let's go ahead and run the call function. And hopefully, hey, nice. So hopefully we'll hear some phones start ringing. Yeah? Nice. Answer it. Don't be shy. Say hi to your friend. All right. Well, hopefully. All All right, so hopefully those calls will start streaming through. It can take some time and. Nice, awesome. So cool. All right. Well, presumably, I think that worked. I'm going to power through this. So all of that's really, really fun. But we want to talk about Twilio and WebRTC and voice over IP in the browser. Hey, there we go. Hold on. I want to talk to somebody. Hey, who is this? Hello? Oh no, that's a sad panda right there. All right, well, let's debug this. Let's see. Why might an application error have occurred? That looks good to me. Dial conference. Let's see. I could power through this, but I'm stubborn. We have some pretty awesome dev tools for figuring out why things like this happen. 25 HTTP retrieval errors. I think my MiFi puck is really hurting this presentation, and I'm sorry about that. Yeah. All right. Well, take it from me. It really does work. Okay, cool. Let's see. I wonder if this is something simple that I can fix. All right. All right. Well, let's see. There we go. Yeah, it's the MiFi puck, guys. But we can talk more about this, how this might work under more ideal circumstances. But I want to keep going. So. WebRTC. Raise your hand if you're familiar with WebRTC. Okay, sweet. Raise your hand if you were here last month. Great. Is that why you're familiar with WebRTC? Awesome. So that was an awesome talk. I don't know how to pronounce the gentleman's name. Faraz. So that was a totally awesome talk. I was engrossed for 45 minutes. And I have no interest in being duplicative. I think he did an excellent job of describing all the cool stuff about WebRTC, as well as some of the challenges. WebRTC is complicated. It's not just complicated if you're trying to build a web-based BitTorrent client. It's complicated in general. There are a lot of acronyms that you're going to have to master if you really want to build an end-to-end WebRTC solution. But there are things that can help. There are services that can kind of help you get started. One of the best ones, frankly, is just simplewebrtc.com. If you're super interested in learning more about WebRTC, go to simplewebrtc.com. Beyond being a great set of tools, there are a bunch of links to great resources about WebRTC. In addition, if you are in a position of trying to consider whether your company wants to adopt WebRTC for like a real production solution that you're going to ship, this is a website called isWebRTCReadyYet.com that has what you see. It's a matrix of all of the different major browsers and where they stand in terms of support for different pieces of WebRTC. So if you're thinking about shipping something out into production, this is a good resource for figuring out what browsers are supported and what browsers are not. So Twilio is using WebRTC to power our voice over IP solution in the browser. So what you see up there is the Twilio cloud. What you see on the far right is just a phone, right? It's a cell phone, it's a landline, it's just part of the PSTN network, the traditional telephone network. In the middle, you see a bunch of mobile devices. Twilio has SDKs for iOS and Android. And what you see on the left is a browser. In particular, in the case of WebRTC, it's a Chrome browser. And one thing that is kind of cool about Twilio's client solution is that you can mix and match all of these endpoints. So you can have one person in Chrome on a browser talking to another person on an iPad, talking to a third person on their cell phone. And Twilio does all of that bridging for you. So the last thing that I wanted to show you was exactly how WebRTC and Twilio work together in the browser. And in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and just fire up the JavaScript console. Cool. Can you guys see that okay? I can make it a little bit bigger. So there's a security thing that we have to figure out. So I mentioned before, on my server-side code, I've got this account SID and this auth token. This is the only way that I can connect to Twilio and do things like make phone calls. I don't have the option of embedding those values in JavaScript in a browser because anybody can view source and see what my credentials are. So there's sort of a security problem here, right? Like, how do we give the browser permission to do things, whether it's make a phone call or receive a phone call? And Twilio's solution to this actually uses another web technology called JSON Web Tokens. And you don't have to care about what a JSON Web Token is, but I will show you what it looks like. So we're just going to go ahead and create a new path, and we're just going to call it token. And we're going to make use of the Twilio library. Again, in this case, we're going to create something called a capability. And just new Twilio capability. Awesome. And let's just go ahead and pass in our credentials as well. OK. So now we've created this variable called capability, and I want to set a capability on it. Specifically, I want to say allow client incoming, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it JSLA. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send this response. So I'm going to go ahead and generate the JSON Web Token and send it in my response. So this middle line, right, so this is 3 lines of code, right? It's pretty simple. But this middle line, all it's saying is, hey, the browser that gets this token is allowed to accept incoming phone calls if they're addressed to a client called JSLA. That's all I've done. And I can go to my browser, and I can type in token, and I can see that it works. And this is what a JSON Web Token looks like. And you never have to care about what it looks like, but there is a standard technology behind it that defines the behavior. So now, going back to my presentation, I want my browser to be able to receive a phone call, because that would be super cool. Now, there is one thing I need to do. I need to include the Twilio script, the Twilio JS library on my web page. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut and paste this one line of code. I'm going to bring it over to my Reveal.js presentation. I'm going to paste it in. And I'm going to go back to Reveal and reload the page. OK. So now the Twilio SDK is loaded on my web page. So now I can use jQuery to make an AJAX request to this /token endpoint. And I can say, hey, when it's done, when you've gotten the token, let's go ahead and just run twilio.device.setup. And let's pass in the token. Awesome. Cool. So we've basically initialized our connection to Twilio. And Twilio now believes that this browser has permission to do stuff, which is awesome. Now, all we need to do is we need to say, hey, we need to tell the browser what to do when a call actually comes in. And that's really easy. I'm just going to go ahead and define this. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just automatically accept the call. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and this will be fun. I'm going to go ahead and grab something called a media stream, which I'll explain a little bit later. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and update the content in that little black box and just say call coming in. OK, sweet. So now this browser is ready to receive a phone call, which is pretty cool. But we're not done. There's just one last thing we have to do. This is pretty much the last bit of code we're going to write. We do need to create one more. We need to create a webhook. I'm just going to go ahead and put it right here. I'm going to call it VOIP, And sorry, I'm going to get rid of all this. I'm going to go ahead and copy our handy-dandy webhook code. And all I'm going to do, instead of dialing into a conference, I'm going to dial into a client. And I'm going to specify what the name of that client is, which is JSLA. And everything else is the same. So now if I go back here and type in VOIP, it should say dial into my client JSLA. So all I need to do is configure my number, my voice request URL with this URL for my VoIP endpoint. All right, so now, can I borrow someone's phone? I need a volunteer. Who wants to be a volunteer? Well, someone closer to me. You're so far away. I just need to borrow one person's cell phone. Awesome, cool, thank you, sir. All right. So let's see if this works. This will be fun. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and dial the number that I purchased. Okay, 896-4972. All right, moment of truth. Oh, see the dialogue? All right. Okay, so I turned off my microphone because I don't need a microphone, because I'm talking to you guys through my computer, through my browser, through this gentleman's cell phone. So that's what you can do with Twilio Client. That's what you can do with WebRTC. And I'm going to go ahead and hang up the call. Oh, not yet. There's one more thing I want to show you guys. This is really fun. So one thing that's cool about WebRTC is that it's an open web standard. Who here is familiar with the Web Audio API? Awesome. A couple of you guys. So it's basically part of the HTML5 spec, and it's just a way of manipulating audio in the browser. And one thing that you can do is actually wire up. There's something called a media stream. This part right here, this connection.media stream. A media stream is just a representation of a stream of media. In this case, a stream of audio. So wouldn't it be cool if I could connect the media stream from WebRTC to maybe a visualization of what the audio looks like? And we can do that using the Web Audio API. So this is awkward, but I'm gonna keep going with this. This works for me. So so I wrote a quick little function which is called visualize media stream, and all I need to do is pass it this media stream value that I saved. All right. Oh, actually, let me go to the next tab. All right, so nothing's happening here. This is empty. So let's see what happens when I connect WebRTC to the Web Audio API. Okay, is anything happening? Awesome. All right, so it works. Sweet. Thank you, sir. I'm not sure if my mic's back on or not, but I can't tell you how long it took me to do that. It might have been 10 days or something like that. I'm not proud of that, but I was really passionate about it, and I finally did get it working. So I think I've blown past my time limit. Thank you all so much for having me. Once again, my name is Carter Rabasa. I'm a developer evangelist for Twilio. Thank you so much for having me.
We got time for some questions.
Sure.
So where does this leave the telecoms?
I don't know. I mean, the telecoms are our partners. So when you use Twilio to make a phone call to a Verizon customer, that goes through Verizon. So from our perspective, the telecommunication companies are our partners. You had a question?
Yeah, I guess with great power comes great responsibility. And this is a great power. Have you guys had any problems with people, trying to use this for like sleazy telemarketing?
Yeah, for sure. all the time. But I mean, luckily, one of the benefits of this being sort of a centralized system is that we can turn those people off. So for instance, if you get a text message that you don't want, if you ever get a text message and you're like, why did I receive this text message? This is spam. One thing you can do is you can reply to the text message with the word stop. That is like an internationally recognized signal that says, hey, take me off, your list or whatever. And in our systems, if we notice that someone's account is getting a high number of stops, we will essentially blacklist that account. So we have a lot of machine learning and intelligence that helps us detect things like fraud and spam. They're not perfect, but they're getting better all the time. And there are a lot of feedback mechanisms that we get from end users that help us make those determinations. Yeah?
Is there a way to tell if a phone number is a Twilio number?
No, I wish I had that capability. I do. I do. I do have that behind the scenes. No, but I wish I had it programmatically. I wish I had it in a way that you could have it, because that'd be really interesting. It'd be interesting to have an API that would specify whether or not this is a Twilio number. I guess one of the reasons that doesn't exist is that on some level, why would you care? I mean, if your phone rings and you answer it and you're having a conversation, maybe it shouldn't matter whether it's being routed through Twilio or not. But I get that question a lot, and perhaps it's on the roadmap somewhere. Is there a specific reason that you thought that would be useful?
No, just to understand if there are any other possibilities from that number. I mean, maybe a standard landline coming through has very little functionality that you can use it for, but if it's a Twilio number coming through, I don't know.
Yeah, but
there's other ways to think about how to use that.
Maybe. I mean, ultimately, the number is really only powerful for the developer, for the owner of the number. As Joe Public, it's just a number, and you can text it, or you can call it, and something may or may not happen, right? There's not much else you can do. But that question comes up a lot. Yes.
What type of users do you generally get? Who uses this, and who are the most interesting type of users?
Oh, you mean like Twilio customers? I mean, everybody uses Twilio. I mean, even, not necessarily in massive ways, but I mean, I assure you, the vast majority of the Fortune 500 probably somewhere within their enterprise are using Twilio for something. There are companies that use it at a large scale in a very visible way. So Home Depot uses it to power a ton of their communications between their employees. Hulu uses Twilio for all of their customer support phone operations. A bunch of companies use Twilio for security, for two-factor authentication. So you can go to the Twilio website and there's a whole big brag page about the companies and the customers that are using Twilio. I think what's more interesting is really the use cases, because I think for people who are new to Twilio, they're kind of that's cool, but I can't relate to why I would want to use that. But until you start to really think about the use cases, you start to think about something like two-factor authentication. You start to think about, Uber is one of our biggest customers. And you start to think about what you can do when you have a really great SMS relationship with your customers, and how SMS can be a really excellent communications channel. And the use cases are also listed on our website, so it's definitely worth checking out.
What's your one use case that you're really wow, I never thought we could do something like that?
I'm a developer, right? So I think the people who work at Twilio who are more sales oriented get excited about the really large opportunities for big companies. I get excited when someone wrote the ability to query Google over SMS, right? And it's ridiculous. It's kind of a toy, right? You send an SMS with a query and you get 5 links back. Is that useful? I don't know, but it's cool, right? And there's someone who literally wrote they wrote a data transport layer over SMS. So you're in the middle of nowhere, you have no data connection, but you have SMS. They actually wrote an app that I mean, it's the slowest data connection in the world, but fundamentally it works, right? Those are the things that I think are super cool. Yeah.
Are you guys limited now by devices and processing speed and stuff? I mean, is there a future strategy? You know what amazes me? How come we don't have picture phones? How come when you call, you still...
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I'm saying they had picture phones before I was born.
Sure.
I'm the oldest person.
Yeah, well, they had them on Star Trek. You know, I don't know. I mean, it's you know, one of the things. It's funny the way you phrase that. I mean, if you think about Twilio purely from like sort of a phone call and SMS perspective, it lets you and your company like connect with an addressable market of 7.5 billion active mobile devices in the world. Like that's an insane number. I know it's easy for people in the US to think about smartphones and iPhones and the latest, wackiest iOS application, but the truth is, like, the vast majority of the world don't have iPhones. And the fact that you can use Twilio to interact with all of them around the world globally is incredibly powerful. In terms of, you know, where we're going in the future, I mean, Twilio is committed to an IP-based future. So this is a VoIP product. Someday, I'm sure, we'll have a video over IP product. And the one thing that's kind of cool for developers, I mean, I'm not sure if you sort of picked up on this, but the code that I wrote to essentially make a regular phone call looked almost identical to the code that I wrote to make a voice over IP phone call. So if you're developing on Twilio today, like whatever cool capabilities come out in the future, the APIs are going to feel very similar. And you will almost forget about whether it's a phone call or a VoIP call or an SMS or some kind of future version of iMessage. Like, you won't really care. It'll just be a couple lines of code.
Can you mix and match in terms of, you know, you make the phone call and the endpoint is the SMS, so that basically you dial a number and you get a text message,
Yeah.
or vice versa?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I'm hearing your use case correctly, I mean, you're saying like you call a number and then your phone vibrates and there's an SMS waiting for you.
Yeah, I can't think of a reason for it at the moment.
Yeah.
Other than that kind of from a web interface, like dial this text message. And then
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's
connect two people together.
Yeah, you're kind of.
Phone call.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, like, so you can absolutely do the scenario that you described. You can't do it using the TWIML. So if I have a webhook that I know is coming from an inbound SMS, I can't write TWIML that says dial, or vice versa. If it's coming in via a phone call, I can't write TWIML that says respond with an SMS. I can make a call to our REST API that sends the SMS, but I can't mix and match it in that way using TWIML. But you can still do it.
Isn't that because there's not a voice recognition algorithm for it yet?
No. I mean, the real answer is that, and I know we need to get Sarah up here, so I guess that'll be the last question. The real answer is that if someone calls Twilio, Twilio actually doesn't know if they're on a mobile phone or if they're on a landline, so it wouldn't make sense to allow the developer to send them an SMS, because Twilio just doesn't know. You as the developer need to be more explicit about the phone number that you want to send an SMS to. So that's kind of the reason there. Anyway, thank you guys so much. I'll be around.